Welcome in, everybody, to another episode of the Most Accurate Podcast. I am your host, Addison Hayes, joined, as always, by one of the most accurate rankers in the entire fantasy community, John Paulson. John, how are you doing on this fine Week 7 Thursday morning?
I'm doing pretty good. I was defending the honor of Rico Dowdle on Twitter. There's some people there that don't believe that he's any good because he had a couple good matchups and ran for 389 yards or whatever. So just have to be the white knight sometimes and run in there and defend Rico. So go check that out. Yeah, I'm doing pretty good. You got to defend our sneaky starts.
Yeah, because every time a running back has two good matchups in a row, they always rush for 180 yards in both games, or 200 yards in one game and then 180 the next. So that happens all the time.
Well, he was undrafted, so therefore his accomplishments don't mean anything, apparently, according to Twitter. At least one Twitter person.
Well, I will let everybody know Rico Dowdle has been my sneaky start for the running back position 2 weeks in a row now. He did not make the list this week because I don't think he's a sneaky start. We'll see what Chuba Hubbard actually ends up doing. But we are doing another episode of Sneaky Starts this week for Week 7. John and I each have a player at each position, quarterback, tight end, running back, and wide receiver, that we view as a sneaky start this week that you don't have to find a way to get in your starting lineup if you have better options. But for some of you out there considering bye weeks and injuries, you might not have a better option, and we want to install a little bit of confidence into these guys in your starting lineup. And then, of course, we'll end with a Bleacher Nation fantasy card for the Sunday slate of games. So, John, why don't you kick us off with your quarterback sneaky start for this week?
Yeah, I thought I was going to do Aaron Rodgers, but they play tonight, right? The Steelers. So,
Yep.
We're not, maybe the video is not going to get out to everybody by then. So let's go with Jared Goff. This is the type of matchup why you draft Jared Goff. He's at home where he traditionally does significantly better than the road. Since 2023, he has averaged 278 yards passing, 2.47 passing touchdowns, 0.7 interceptions for a fantasy score of 20.9 per game. Compare that to his road splits, 15.4 per game on the road in the same span. Tampa is 22nd in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position, so it's not like a prime matchup, but it's still a pretty good matchup. Tampa has a tendency to get into these shootouts. They have a pretty good offense. They should be able to score on Detroit and keep Goff and the Lions offense with their foot on the pedal. It has one of the highest totals of the week, 52.5. So the Lions are projected to score. It's an implied total of 28.8. You have to think that Goff gets a couple touchdowns and throws for 250 here.
Yep, I love it a lot. And I'll just throw my sneaky start out at the quarterback position. It is Baker Mayfield on the opposite side of this, which I think kind of rides the line of whether or not he's actually considered a sneaky start, but I do wonder if people might be concerned about playing him because he's probably not going to have Emeka Egbuka this week. Won't have Chris Godwin. Maybe doesn't even have Mike Evans. I saw that he is trying to return to practice today on Thursday, so we'll see what that actually means and if he's able to get enough practice time in for them to actually activate him for this week. But he might not have his top three guys, essentially. And if that's the case, I do wonder if people would shy away from him for other favorable matchups. But I just think that Baker Mayfield is a great quarterback who can get it done with any wide receivers, not just necessarily his top guys. We saw it last year when Godwin and Evans were out simultaneously. He made it work with Cade Otton and Bucky Irving and Rashad White and Ryan Miller and Sterling Shepard, I think, was on the team last year too. So he'll have some of that same grouping of guys this year, and include Tez Johnson into that list, whoever this Cameron Johnson is that popped up last week. Baker Mayfield can get it done. The Lions are 24th in adjusted fantasy points against the position. They've allowed all starting quarterbacks except for Joe Flacco to throw 2 or more passing touchdowns on them this year. So I think even if he doesn't have his wide receivers, I'm still playing Baker Mayfield to stay competitive with the Lions tonight, which will be a good matchup for Baker and also simultaneously for your guy, a great matchup for Jared Goff.
Yeah, if you're interested in this more about this game and maybe some other sneaky starts from it, I did write up Sterling Shepard, Tez Johnson, and Cameron Johnson. 2 of the 3 are going to deliver. I don't know which 2. but they're worthy dart throws. I also wrote up K-Dot in the tight end position because of I believe in Baker Mayfield and this offense, and this is a indoors nice matchup against the Lions. I think you're gonna get some good production.
One question I have for you, just around this game while we're on it, are you willing to see if Mike Evans plays? It's a Monday night game, so if you have Mike Evans and you're thinking that he's going to play, do you roll the dice with him? Do you only do that if you have one of the backup options that you can pivot over to Shepard or one of the Johnsons?
Yeah,
How are you reading Evans?
It's a speculation on a Thursday when we're recording this. I like to wait until Sunday morning to really have all the information that we have. Usually we have somebody come out with some kind of report about Monday night. However, not always because it's still a full day away. We usually get that stuff the same day. We'll get that information on Monday. I probably would shy away if I have somebody decent that I can roll out there, just, not knowing what his status is given how long he's been out. Unless you get something like a full practice today, which I doubt you will. Or maybe a full practice on Friday might be enough to convince me, or Saturday, because they do practice Thursday, Friday, Saturday, I think, for the Monday night game. So you have time and kind of see how the week develops. But if he's like limited times 3 and questionable, and we're not getting like he should be good to go type language, then I would probably shy away from it. And maybe I'm sure you can grab a Cameron Johnson or a Tez Johnson and off the waiver wire and wait if that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I think that's the only way that I would play it, is if I had one of the backup options that I could pivot to on Monday night. That's the only way I'd keep Mike Evans in my lineup through the Sunday games, which sucks because there's a lot of injuries to the wide receiver position. We'll get to that very shortly. But yeah, if Mike Evans were to play, it would be a tremendous matchup, both for him and for Baker Mayfield, my sneaky start. And then hopefully for your sneaky start in Jared Goff as well on the other side. Moving on to the tight end position, though, John, why don't you hit us with your tight end sneaky start for week 7?
Yeah, this one is sort of injury-based because it looks like David Njoku has a knee injury, and he got knocked out of the game last week and is either going to be out or probably limited this week. So I'm thinking that Harold Fannin's going to see extra snaps. I believe he's leading the position in yards after catch. Just kind of built different type of a guy. And we know Dylan Gabriel likes to target the tight end. So you look at this defense, the Miami Dolphins have struggled basically in all facets, but they've given up 65 or more yards in recent weeks to Dalton Kincaid and then 3 rookies, Oronde Gadsden, Mason Taylor, and Tyler Warren all this year. So I think another rookie could go for 65 plus on him.
Dylan Gabriel threw the ball 52 times on Sunday, and a very negative game script for Cleveland against the Pittsburgh Steelers. So if we see a similar kind of situation where Miami is potentially able to score on Cleveland, then, the Browns are kind of playing from behind a little bit more. We might see, I'm not expecting 52 pass attempts because I do expect Quinshon Judkins to have more work this week against a soft Dolphins run defense. But Harold Fannin, especially without David Njoku, is a tremendous play this week. My sneaky start, you actually just mentioned him, is Mason Taylor. He gets a Carolina Panthers defense that is currently ranked 32nd in adjusted fantasy points against the tight end position. And this is kind of similar to Baker Mayfield, where some people really started to get in on Mason Taylor, and then he had a dud performance last week. And I'm wondering if people are a little bit worried about throwing him back out there again. But considering the matchup and considering the fact that Garrett Wilson is probably not going to play, Josh Reynolds doesn't even look like he's going to play either. So it seems like the Jets are going to be without both of their top 2 wide receivers. So it might just be Mason Taylor as kind of like their lead receiver, so to speak, and then Arian Smith and Breece Hall out of the backfield. I don't even know if I know anybody else that's going to be able to catch passes on that team who's even on their wide receiver depth chart after those guys. So I think just out of pure volume, I think Mason Taylor should be a very good start this week against Carolina, based on the matchup, based on the volume, based on Mason Taylor's own talent himself. And I think he's a good start even after the dub week last week.
I think Allen Lazard might be now a little Lazard week. We'll see.
Oh, that's right. They still have Lazard.
They're
Is
trying
that
to trade
who else?
him.
That did you pull?
People were trying to get him traded to the Steelers after the Calvin Austin injury. It makes sense. I wrote up Mason Taylor as well. Carolina, I believe you mentioned it, 32nd last in the league tight end AFPA. They've given up an average of 6.2 catches for 74 yards, 0.67 touchdowns to the position. And I do think that the one target was an aberration, because if you look at his 3 previous games, he had 25 targets. So he's been extremely involved in the offense on most weeks. Last week, I think, was an aberration. They're going to have to scheme him some looks in order to move the ball without Garrett Wilson.
Yeah, you would think that the Jets would have positive net yards this week. That they had -10 last week from the passing yards versus the sack yards. So hopefully Fields is in the positives this week, and that's good for Mason Taylor. So running back position, then, John, I really like your pick here at running back. So why don't you hit us with your running back sneaky start?
Yeah, I didn't want to use him because he blew up last week. I was thinking about Jaylen Warren, but that's another Thursday player against Cincy, which I think he's going to have a nice week. And I also thought about going back with JCM, who didn't really deliver last week against the Bears like I thought he would. He didn't go over, or didn't go more on his yardage, which was surprising. He's got another good matchup against Dallas. I'm going to go with Kimani Vidal. He had a 138 total yards. He had a 38-yard run. This is a funny situation, because we had I believe it was Mike Garofalo had a report that Hassan Haskins was going to be the lead back. And when I get those types of reports from the national reporters, I tend to act on them because they have more information than I do typically. Schefter doesn't usually miss. But some of Garofalo's on my Money News Twitter list as well. So kind of moved. I had Vidal ahead, and then moved Haskins at slightly ahead. I still wasn't confident, because I thought Vidal, profiles as the better, more explosive back. And I believe last year Vidal ran ahead of Haskins, but it did seem like Haskins was in the lead this year for whatever reason. Anyway, Vidal, fast forward few hours, Vidal's got 138 total yards, touchdown on 21 touches. Sometimes these things, when they just don't know who they're going to play, all it takes is one explosive play or somebody looking good, and they're going to ride the hot hand. And I think that's probably what happened here. But he did receive 4 of the first 5 backfield touches on the first drive. So that tells me that was probably the plan all along. So I'm expecting him to see a sizable workload this week. The Colts have been kind of mediocre. They're not like a great matchup. They're 11th in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the position, but they've given up 109 total yards on average and 0.67 touchdowns to opposing backfields this season. If the Chargers can keep the game script fairly close, I think Vidal will have a nice day.
Yep, I like it a lot. I think he's definitely solidified himself as the Chargers' RB1 in this backfield until Omarion Hampton returns, which, based on the news on that, sounds like they were saying it's not a season-ending injury, but that it's going to be more of an extended time. So if you picked up Vidal, it sounds like you might have him for quite some time here, maybe as we get into almost the fantasy playoffs, potentially. And then we'll see where we're at with Omarion Hampton. But I think you got a very good player and a very good start, not only this week, but for an extended period of time as well in Kimani Vidal. My running back sneaky start is the guy that you just mentioned in Jacory Croskey-Merritt. I did decide to go back with him because of, like what you said, he had a very mediocre week against the Chicago Bears on Monday night. Even had a fumble, possibly even 2 fumbles. I think they credited Daniels with the handoff fumble. But it just wasn't that good of a night. However, he did have 17 rush attempts, 18 total touches for 68 yards. So he was definitely the clear lead for the Washington Commanders. And I think that that's just going to continue to carry on throughout the rest of the year. And now he gets a Dallas Cowboys defense, which feels like is really all I need to say when it comes to why we should be playing players against certain defenses. Just play your players against the Dallas Cowboys. They're 31st in adjusted fantasy points allowed to the running back position. JCM should continue to see a large amount of the workhorse role for the Washington Commanders. And if they're able to keep things tight, this becomes more of a shootout. Maybe we get, an 80 plus, 90 plus, 100 plus yard day, possibly a touchdown for JCM. in a very, very good matchup, kind of like what we saw from Rico Dowdle last week. Well, I was very tempted, like I said, to make my sneaky start, but went with JCM chasing the Dallas Cowboys defense.
Yeah, and I apologize for mentioning him earlier. I should have stayed away from the spoilers. I did not see that you put him in the rundown for the podcast today. But I love it because I wrote him up as well. Dallas has given up an average of 169 total yards and 1 touchdown to opposing running backs, opposing backfields, including 239 to Rico Dowdle last week and 155 yards to Breece Hall the previous week. So they've been in bad form all year, but they've been in really bad form the last couple of weeks.
Yes, very, very bad. Players against Dallas. Now, moving on to the wide receiver position, the final position for the week. And I feel like this might be a little bit more important than anything, given the state of the wide receiver position right now. We don't have Puka Nacua. We don't have Garrett Wilson. We maybe don't have Mike Evans to also go along with not having, Emeka Ibuka and Chris Godwin. We'll have to see what happens with CeeDee Lamb. We have bye weeks this week, I know, for Zay Flowers and Khalil Shakir, possibly even Keon Coleman if you're even trying to have a depth piece there as a start. That we're in some pretty dire straits right now for the wide receiver position, John. So I feel like this one might be a little bit more necessary this week out of all the positions entirely. So why don't you hit us with your wide receiver sneaky start this week?
Yeah, scrolling through the receiver section of sneaky starts this week, there are several interesting names I could have mentioned, and I want to touch on Tutu Atwell with Puka Nacua out. They've been trying to feature Atwell, and he's going to come back from a hamstring injury apparently. So as long as he's healthy, he's interesting as far as a pickup and play with all those targets available against Jacksonville, who's 23rd in just fantasy points allowed. I also wanted to mention Trey Tucker with Jacoby Myers possibly out and Brock Bowers likely out. Like, he's been pretty good. 71 and 70 yards in the last 2 games. People just think he was that 145 3-touchdown guy, and that's it. He had a 2 for 54 in week 1 as well. Like, he's had some games that have been pretty solid. But I don't want to bury the player I'm going to talk about is Luther Burden with DJ Moore leaving in an ambulance on Monday night with a groin injury, apparently. I don't know what's going on there. I don't think he's going to play. If he does play, I don't think he's going to be 100%. We should see Luther Burden in a bigger role. He is number 3 in yards per route run among qualified receivers right now. I mean, obviously he had that huge game. And we did not really see a big bump in snaps post-bye. But we might see it this week. Certainly we'll see it if Moore is out. I think Burden will be the one that's playing starter snaps pretty quickly alongside Zacchaeus and Odunze. So good matchup against New Orleans. They're 21st in just fantasy points allowed to the position. He's a talented player. If Moore's out, he should have a nice game.
I will never say anything negatively against Olamide Zacchaeus because he delivered massively in a championship game for me last year when I had the Daniels Olamide Zacchaeus stack that hit my opponent with like 50 points because Zacchaeus was amazing. So I'll never say anything negative against Olamide Zacchaeus, but Luther Burden is better than Olamide Zacchaeus for sure. And I think the transition is going to come at some point to where they're going to trust their second round rookie wide receiver over Zacchaeus, and then especially over DJ Moore as well. And maybe this injury just opens the door a little bit sooner because I think it's very clear for the Bears that their future is Odunze, Loveland, and Burden, and not DJ Moore and Olamide Zacchaeus as well. So I think Burden is a really, really good play this week. My sneaky start, I did think about doing Tutu Atwell, so I'm glad that you mentioned him. In 6 games played without Puka Nacua last year, averaged 11 PPR fantasy points per game, and had 8 or more targets in 3 out of those 6 games. Had stat lines of like 4 for 93, 4 for 82, 6 for 58, 6 for 51. So he was heavily involved last year without Puka Nacua. So if he is actually going to play, great matchup. I would definitely consider throwing him out there. But my actual sneaky start is Christian Kirk, who is fresh off a bye week, playing the Seattle Seahawks, who are 24th in adjusted fantasy points against the wide receiver position, which I thought would have been worse considering the fantasy points that they have been bleeding to the wide receiver position as of late. Emeka Buka got them for 7 for 163 and 1. 2 weeks ago, BTJ had his best performance of the year last week, 8 for 90 and 1, 6 for 61 and 1 against Marvin Harrison Jr., 4 for 108 against Ricky Pearsall. They give up a lot of fantasy points. And while I think that is also an indication that, it's a great matchup for Nico Collins, we can't throw Nico Collins into a sneaky start video. So I think Christian Kirk, who the last we saw of him the week before the bye week, was 4 for 64 in their blowout win against the Ravens. And then also had 8 targets in his first week back in week 3 off of his preseason injury. Usually I think the bye week would be an indicator that, hey, we might see a little bit more usage from rookie wide receivers. That's why he went with Luther Burden, and they do have 2 rookies on their team in Jaden Higgins and Jalen Noel. But I think Christian Kirk is just a veteran, and I think they're going to need to throw a lot to keep up with Seattle's highly powered offense right now. So I like Christian Kirk as a sneaky play. More PPR, not really a touchdown guy. But if you need 8 to 10 PPR points, maybe gets up to 12 or more, that could be Christian Kirk this week.
I think it's a good call. I didn't write up Christian Kirk. I had too many receivers already, but I did write up CJ Stroud. Seattle is a pass funnel. They're like second in the league in rushing yards allowed. So they can't run on them. Houston's running game's okay. They're like middle of the road. I thought they were going to be worse than what they are. But this looks like a game where CJ Stroud's going to have to throw quite a bit, and that should boost not only Nico Collins, but Christian Kirk.
So that wraps it up for our sneaky starts for week 7. 2 players at all positions. So we got Jared Goff, Baker Mayfield, Harold Fannin, Mason Taylor, Kimani Vidal, Jacory Croskey-Merritt, Luther Burden, and Christian Kirk. We will now get into our Bleacher Nation fantasy card that we have hit 2 of the last 3. We did not hit last week. Both of our legs did not hit. So, and I don't even think our alternate legs hit. I think you mentioned J.K. Dobbins, who did not hit, and I mentioned Tedero McMillan, who scored twice, but didn't really do much in terms of the receiving yards. So we went effectively 0 for 4 last week. So the reverse parlay would have gone crazy. But we'll be back at it. We did hit on 2 in a row before last week, so we're back this week, see if we can win some money. As a reminder for everybody out there that if you are signing up to play on the Bleacher Nation fantasy app, it's just a pick'em game. You hit more or less on all of the props for every single player, and they are running a promotion that you can have a 50% deposit match up to $100. So if you deposit $200, you get a free $100 in bonus cash added to your account after the fact. They are running a promo leg for this Sunday, for the Sunday night game with Bijan Robinson more than half a rushing yard. That is unfortunately for new users only, but if you are a new user, which they define as having not yet played a lineup, then you would qualify for this promotional leg that you can throw in there and start building out your card. So, John, why don't you hit us with your first player prop for this week?
Yeah, I mentioned him earlier. Trey Tucker. I was looking through the lines, and his receiving yards is at 41.5. He had 70 last week, 62 the week before, 13 against the Bears in week 4, and then he had that 145-yard game week 3. And then he's hit it 4 times in 6 games, and I think with the injury to Jacoby Myers, to Brock Bowers, and then the likely game script here with the Chiefs at Kansas City, expecting the Raiders to fall behind in this one. I don't know. This seems like a really low line to me, and I think Tucker will beat it fairly easily.
Some have been calling Trey Tucker this year's version of Juwan Jennings. They both had week 3 40-point games with 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, and have sneakily been a very stable wide receiver asset for a maybe slightly underperforming team based on what the Niners did last year. So that could continue. We'll never know. Maybe Trey Tucker is this year's version of Juwan Jennings. I like that call a lot. My leg for this week is I liked a lot of them. I was looking at Quinshon Judkins rushing yards because I like the matchup a lot. Obviously, you could attack a lot of people in that Buccaneers Lions game that is on Monday night. But I like Chris Olave more than 57.5 receiving yards. They do draw a matchup against the Chicago Bears in Chicago, which is not like the greatest matchup for wide receivers, but Chicago has, given up some pretty big games, notably to Amon-Ra and Jamison Williams in week 2. They gave up 68 to George Pickens and 64 to Devontae Turpin in the same game. And then, that Monday night game, Luke McCaffrey had the big 30-yard touchdown. Chris Moore had 46 yards as well. Jalen Lane had that big 37-yarder down the sideline. So there's opportunity. And with the way that I think New Orleans plays, how quickly they play, the amount of targets that Chris Olave gets on a weekly basis, which has been 10, 11, 6, 14, 10, 13. I think just out of pure volume, he hasn't been the best in terms of yards per reception. So I think this is a good line in terms of where he's been. But 6 for 98 last week against the Patriots. And with just sheer volume, I think 57.5 receiving yards is a pretty solid line for him to hit them more.
Yeah, he's beat it twice, and then he had 57 in week 3, 54 in week 2, 54 in week 1. So he's been really close to perhaps beating this line, 5 times out of 6 games, but just missing it those first 3 weeks.
Yep. That's why, like I said, I think it's a good line. I think he hits them more based on what he did last week and in a pass-heavy game script against Chicago. So that is our lineup card for this week. The Bijan Robinson promotion for new users only. Trey Tucker more than 41.5 receiving, and Chris Olave more than 57.5 receiving yards as well. If you are not a new user, you could throw on an additional leg from any of the sneaky starts that we have on here too, or play just a 2-legger with Trey Tucker and Chris Olave. That would work as well. But you get a 6x payout for those 3 plays, and then you get the 50% deposit match up to $100 on the new Bleacher Nation Fantasy app. So we appreciate everybody for tuning in this week for Week 7 Sneaky Starts. We'll be back next week for Week 8 Sneaky Starts. Hope you guys all win all of your matchups this week. You have a phenomenal weekend, and we will catch you guys next week on the Most Accurate Podcast. See you.